Good afternoon, good morning. For those of you joining live, anybody watching the replay, thanks for joining. This is Ask Nancy, my monthly live stream. I'm Nancy Berger, coach, consultant, speaker. You all know me as like to talk about rethinking the way we think. I do these every month so I can have guests come on and discuss different leadership topics, communication, whatever. Thrilled to be joined again today by my friend Dan Berg, who who is with me in March, and we talked leadership. But today we're continuing the conversation. As you know, Dan is an expert in the tech space. He's an entrepreneurial spirit, but has worked in corporate for years and years, is transitioning into a consulting role. So if your company needs help, talk to Dan. So Dan, before we get chatting about leadership challenges, which is what we're talking about today, give a little thumbnail of what you do for our audience.
Oh, sure. Okay, we'll do the plug now. Great.
Yes.
So as Nancy said, I come out of the tech space, originally software engineer, the last 20 years CTO in small to medium-sized companies, typically venture or PE-backed. And I've transitioned over the last year into consulting and advisory, focused mainly on helping tech companies and helping people like VCs and PE firms that have portfolios of tech companies with due diligence, with prep for sale or transaction, with fixing distressed situations. A lot of the fixing oftentimes includes assessing what even is the root cause of the problem. I've seen a lot of things. I've cleaned up a lot of messes in the past, and there's a good business there, helping people figure that stuff out. And also, I mean, look, I don't mean to make light of it. There's also a lot of coaching and mentoring that goes along with that as well, helping younger, mid-career or even earlier career leaders or future leaders kind of hone their chops and figure out their place within what can be complex, corporate structure, things like that.
For sure. I mean, that's kind of what we're talking about here. I mean, the tactical stuff, the strategic stuff, and a lot of the times you have to kind of figure out what the problems are, and the dot connecting may bring you someplace entirely different. So anyway, thank you for being here. I always love chatting with you. We get philosophical. We get philosophical sometimes, but today I'd love to just chat about the challenges that leaders are facing. And that's such a broad topic, but I think what we want to kind of dig in on is some of the soft stuff, which you said it, and I agree. I hate calling them soft skills.
Yeah. It's an okay term. The problem is it has come to minimize the importance of those skills. And I, personally can't emphasize enough the importance of what we typically call soft skills. I mean, to me, I think it is actually the crux of good leadership, to be distinguished from, and we can talk about this in a little bit, leadership versus management. I think they are related, but they are not the same thing. And I think people often errantly equate them.
They're not the same thing. And leadership occurs at any and every level of an organization.
Right.
So to your point, like we're talking about communication, active listening, speaking least and last. I mean, that alone is really a challenge for so many people, leaders, managers, contributors at any level. Like speak least and last. It is a sign of strength. Talk about that a little bit in your experience, because I know as a coach, in my experience, coaching is speaking least and last. So it's almost like we're conditioned to do that as opposed to prescribing and advising. But a leader walks into a bar. No, a leader walks into a room and is, got their team meeting going. Oh, I have to lead. Well, so tell me what you think about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think in my experience, and I always try to keep this top of mind for myself as well, a good leader leads by walking into the room and asking questions and listening to what the assembled people have to say. And, the other thing, it's a cliche, it's said a lot, but it's really important to stress, is listening to understand, not listening to respond. Right.
Yes.
Because it gets to this whole notion of a great leader knows they're not the smartest person in the room. They shouldn't strive to be the smartest person in the room. They should be surrounding themselves with people who are experts in all
Right.
the specific areas. And look, a lot of people who are managers, aspiring leaders, want to grow their leadership realm. The more people, the more departments that you have working underneath you, it's impossible to be an expert and a specialist in every single area. So you really have to foster an environment where you surround yourself with smart people and you listen to what they have to say.
Yeah. And what else? The byproduct of that, which is a critical element in any team, is trust building. So you defer to, oh, I don't know anything about this. Okay. So then right there, you're vulnerable.
Yep.
Number two, you're asking for help. Three, you're building trust. Four, you're actively listening. I mean, there's so much goodness in it. And I think if that's the biggest takeaway today, I would be really happy. And that is, speak least and last, like ask questions, approach it Socratically.
Yes.
And that listening to understand bit is so powerful. Like how many times we know we all do it. You're kind of forming your rebuttal, while someone is talking. But if you just, and what else, right? If you just tag and what else to the end of anything anybody says, you're going to cast yourself in a different light as a leader.
Well, yeah, and we're both throwing out these terms that tend to get a little overused and are a little bit cliche, but the notion of safe space, right, for people who are working in an organization, if they perceive they're in an environment where the leaders are actually listening and are actually valuing people's opinions, it becomes a very safe environment in which to be Socratic. And I think the other punchline that it's important to throw out there, which is something that I have always fostered with teams that I've managed, and I've seen other really good leaders do the same thing, is best answer wins. No matter where it comes from, no matter who it comes from, where you are in the org structure doesn't matter. Best answer wins. If you got the best idea for how to solve a problem and everyone is like, didn't think of that. Okay. And you talk it through and it's like, that's the best answer. Then that's the way it's going to go. And that also very quickly fosters an environment where people feel really comfortable about stepping up, making their voices heard, sharing ideas, the combination of these things, listening to understand, Socratic method, best answer wins. Like it just.
So I have a question. An important question, especially because you're in the tech space, you have so much deep experience there. How do we address the issue of the tranche of people, the tech, the analysts, the data? Sometimes these are contributors who you won't hear a peep out of, who are doing their thing, may have the great idea, doesn't get past their headphones, may have the great idea, but how do we get them to be comfortable? I know we talk about creating safe space, but do you know what I'm talking about? Like some of these. Yeah. So what are your thoughts on that?
So it helps to have come out of this environment. I was a hands-on keyboard coder, designer, developer early in my career. And frankly, for a good part of it, I was fairly introverted as well. It took me a little while to break out of that shell. There were times where I just wanted to be hands-on keyboard and get the work done. I think another mark of a good leader, and this gets back to sort of the EQ and the intuition and all that sort of stuff, is knowing who is apt to have a thought about the topic that's being discussed and may not necessarily of their own volition raise their hand, and knowing enough to call on them in a non-confrontational way where you've essentially given them an opening to voice their opinion. Where in the tech realm, I don't want to geek out, but like things get very specialized very quickly. So again,
Yeah.
the leader can't possibly know deeply every single piece of what's going on. You need to know enough to be dangerous, but like you can't know everything. But one of the things you need to know enough of is who are the experts and who are the ones who are not apt to speak up. Where there's a conversation going, I can quickly go, Bill, what are your thoughts? What do you think? Does this make any sense? And as soon as you give someone an opening, then oftentimes it's suddenly, again, getting back to that overused term, it's safe for them to be
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
yeah, it's actually not a good idea, and here's why.
And here's why.
Whereas they otherwise may not have spoken up just because, it's not their personality type.
Yeah, I mean, and this feeds into the whole notion of creating a learning culture, creating a feedback culture, normalizing, the back and forth, so it's not so hierarchical, so people feel like they can stop in or schedule something on their manager's calendar or the leader's calendar and just talk things through, normalizing all of this stuff so that it is safe to get this sort of vertically integrated approach to problem
Yep.
solving and collaboration and all that.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, again, in the environment in which I've worked for decades, like, look, if you're in an organization that's greater than 10 people, then you need to start having a coherent org chart, right? You need
Right.
managers reporting to people, and there is a trend towards starting to slice out more of the middle management, very recently, but you still need an organizational chart. But in a lot of what it is that I do and have done for a living, the work is actually very cross-functional, and the org chart doesn't matter quite as much as the right set of people that are assembled to get the particular project or initiative done. And that tends to be very cross-functional, very collaborative, but you still, from a leadership perspective, you still need to make sure that that's working the way it's supposed to work, that processes are being followed that will yield the right outcome in the right period of time. And to your point, you need to be, if you've got 6 of these teams all off running, building things, you need to know what's going on with each one. And you need to make sure you've got the feedback mechanisms working up across at all times. Otherwise, people run off in the wrong directions and get.
Yeah. So how do you, this cross-functional piece, I think is worth unpacking a little bit, because sometimes it happens by virtue of the project. It's required for teams to reach across functions.
Right.
But if that's not part of the built-in model, sometimes different departments don't interface. They may not even really know what each other is doing. So first of all, do you agree that leaders should really try to encourage cross-functional communication and interaction, whether or not they're necessarily working together? And if you do agree with that, what are some ways to do that?
So 100% agree with it. And it gets back to, when I in prep for this conversation, I was thinking a little bit about what are some of the core attributes that are part of being a great leader, not necessarily that I embody them, but just, on paper, what are they? And this notion of, you've got a complex org, you've got different teams doing different things, multiple initiatives going on. A good leader, I think it is incumbent upon them to ensure that all of these teams know what the others are doing and know where the basically the connection points are. And have aha moments about, oh, you guys are working on that, we're working on this. Oh, okay, we should get a couple people together and figure out how these two things fit together, etc. That's the leader's job, is to both foster it from a cultural perspective, but then to your other piece of this, what are the mechanisms by which you do it? And like, look, again, kind of coming back to the tech world that I grew up in, especially looking at the last 10 years, there's a lot of very good processes and tools that have been invented and deployed to help enable this. But it's not just about, we're going to throw Slack in it. We're going to throw, I'm not
Right.
going to name a whole bunch of, tech project management tools, but like there's a million of them. We're just going to throw all this stuff in there and that's going to solve the problem. Those are just enablers, right?
Yeah.
It's like handing a builder a saw, right? And they've never used it before and being like, off you go. It's like, this is just the tool. It's like, right, someone has to be managing how the tools are being used and like, what's actually getting done.
Yeah.
So it's the leader's job to deploy the right tools and processes, but also make sure that they are turning, the gears are turning in the right ways at all times. And like, sometimes you discover you got the wrong tool for the job and you put a different place,
right. And it's not just box checking either. Like,
right.
So to another leadership challenge that we might want to touch on is this vulnerability piece, which means a whole lot of things. But within this context, it could also mean a leader saying, how do we do this differently? How do we do this better? I'm noticing that, people are talking to each other across functions only when we're on a Zoom meeting, or, it feels a little like they're not productive conversations, or they're not really engaged conversations. They're more just like, so being vulnerable enough to say, I need everybody's help to figure out how we can do this differently. And what are some ideas? Or I don't know. I just love to hear your thoughts about that, because vulnerability gets a bad rap.
It's vulnerability is definitely one piece of it, but another that I think people really appreciate is another way of talking about it is just honesty, candor, looking at a situation and going like, okay, guys, this isn't working as well as we need it to be working. Yeah. Here's what we've tried. Use of the word we is actually a really good thing a lot of the time as well, right? It's not a cynical ploy. It's like inclusive, that everyone's responsible for the solution. These are the things we've tried. This is what's not working. I may already have an opinion about how to fix it, but I'm not going to lead with mine. Going back to something that we started with. It's like, what do you all think about ways in which we can improve this? And my hope is always that someone is going to articulate the idea that I have so that I can make it their idea rather than mine. And that's a big part of it is, ensuring that people have a voice and they are included in the solutions to the problem solving, and admitting that there's that's the biggest part often, is admitting there's actually a problem and something isn't.
Yeah.
And the other part of the vulnerability, like at some point the buck has to stop somewhere, and it is the leader's responsibility, even if in reality they're not the sole culpable person for the problem, to basically raise their hand and be like, okay, look, when we put this in place, I screwed it up. Like this isn't working and we need to fix it. And like, it's on me, but like, we're gonna crowdsource the best solution to the problem.
And that moment of, I screwed it up. Like, I don't know if leaders at large really understand the positive impact that can have on a team. I screwed it up. Suddenly,
it's like 100%. If you're saying it all the time,
right?
Then there's a competency question,
right,
that needs to be raised. But if it's just, we get into these corporate environments and like we forget sometimes, or we pretend, or we feel like we're forced to pretend that we're not human, right? And like when we're human, we're fallible, and we're trying to make the best decisions we can in ambiguous situations where we don't have all the variables, and like sometimes you're going to be right and sometimes you're not going to be right. And when you're not right, you have to say, okay, I wasn't right about this. And like, again, it gets back to like, people just feel safer and more productive in those environments where it's like, okay, people, part of this whole EQ thing is everyone, not just having a voice, but accepting responsibility for the things that they didn't do right. And what I've seen in my travels is the more honest I am about something I was wrong about, the more likely someone else is to step up and be like, yeah, I went off and built it this way, and like, I'm not happy with it. It's not right for what we need. We need to take another swing at this.
Yeah, it's freeing. It creates a whole different, right? It's like, well, since we're being honest,
Right.
But so, and I find it poetic that your company name is Intersect Advisory, because all of the things we're talking about are all interrelated, and there's all intersection points at different parts of leadership. And I think what we're trying to do today, I know what I'm trying to do, is to normalize the discussion so that leaders understand they're not supposed to have all the answers. And that, on the contrary, if they reveal that they don't have all the answers, they will build a stronger team. It
Yes.
may feel a little counterintuitive, but it's not. I mean, the biggest strength a leader can illustrate is the ability to show that soft underbelly, and everyone will rise to meet them there.
Yes. 100%. Couple things about that. Back to your offhand comment. The name of my company.
Did I get it wrong?
No, it's not. No, I was going to say the name of my company is not accidental. Like, there's a reason.
Oh, yeah.
I use the word intersect, and you pretty much nailed it. The other thing that we haven't touched on yet, but I think it's the perfect rejoinder to what you just said, is one of the most important and noble jobs of a good leader is to create new leaders. And you're never going to do that if you're monopolizing the conversation, if you're taking all the credit, like all of these things that we are talking about. Everything we've touched on over the last 20 minutes is geared toward giving people a platform and a safety and blanking on the word, but the right environment in which to begin to hone their own leadership jobs.
Right. To rise to give them a forum in which they can rise to their potential. I mean, that's your job, right? To make sure that people, okay, so let's talk about that, because I think this is another challenge that some leaders face. This professional development piece, it's like we want to kind of morph it from it's one of those things I have to do, the reviews, and then the questionnaire for HR, and then where do you see yourself in a year? And really integrate it as part of the leadership style, where the development of these leaders around you is top of mind and is just integrated into the day-to-day. Like, oh, so we're in a team huddle, we're talking about how we're going to solve this problem, and one of your team members shows an aptitude for something you just really weren't aware of, and you kind of pull that thread a little bit.
Yep.
What that means to the team member, and then how it shows for you as a leader. I mean, that's good stuff.
And that's how it happens. The formal HR review process that you mentioned can often be an exercise in tedium and administrivia and all that. It's all the things that happen on a daily basis, where, like you said, you discover someone's got an aptitude for something, and you sort of, you pull them along into that. It's the daily stand up or the team meeting where, you're like, Bill, what do you think? It's every one of those little things that starts to get people, up the rungs of their own, leadership ladder, where it's not necessarily even an explicit thing. It's just giving people the opportunities. Look, not everyone wants to lead, and not everyone is a leader. And some people are very happy being super strong individual contributors throughout most of their career, and that's great. That's fine. But for the people who have it in them somewhere, right, it's not about the twice yearly check-in with the HR review form and all that. It's about, what are you doing on a daily basis to help these people grow?
Yeah, and even if it's not necessarily directly related to their job description. So, for instance, If somebody shows a passion for something that may come out in a offsite or at a lunch thing or whatever, and their passion for a leader to say, wow, it sounds like you're really excited about pottery. I don't know. Maybe you can start an employee resource group about it, or maybe you can, that it shows that you're listening to understand, you're listening to know your people, you have a holistic approach to leadership, and that person could feel so validated and like, darn, I'm going to create an ERG for potters, and we're going to, throw pot, like whatever it is, it doesn't matter. It's the point that you're making, Dan, about we are humans. How we do anything is how we do everything. We bring ourselves to work, we bring ourselves home. Show up as that, with that piece, that humanity piece, and see what it does for your team. And you and I both know it translates into outcomes. It translates into results.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, look, this is how great things get done. Every time you read a Harvard Business School case study, or somebody else's case study about this awesome thing that got built by this cool team within this company, whether it's a consumer product or a tech product, whatever it happens to be, you always find these sorts of descriptions and anecdotes in the study around how the team was structured and the empowerment of people. Like it's not just cynical, nice to have. It's like, it's real stuff, and it's really important. The last thing, a lot of things we've been talking about are kind of fall into the category of what broadly is known as servant leadership. Where you're strong, but you're strong enough to get the hell out of the way and let people do their thing. I think there is another angle on this, which is that the places where as a leader you need to be strong. And a lot of it comes back to some of the soft skills, but in particular, a couple of things I was thinking about were most important that I've seen, that I've tried to emulate: clarity, candor, transparency, trustworthiness.
Yeah.
When you say yes to someone, make sure you actually mean it and you can deliver on it. And when you can't say yes to someone, look them in the eye and say no, and explain why they can't get what they want, or they can't do what the thing is that they want to do. And a lot of times people get really squirrely about that sort of stuff.
Oh my gosh.
They're not operating with candor. They're not being transparent. They're yesing people to death when they know full well the answer is going to be no. Like, to me, that's disasters waiting to happen. And that's a root cause of, I don't know the real answer, but 2/3 of corporate dysfunction is
dysfunction, and which leads to misunderstanding and distrust and toxicity even. So candor is not mutually exclusive of tact.
Correct.
Right? So it's finding that
you can be truthful and kind at the same time, but you need to be truthful.
Yes, and transparent. I'm so glad you raised that issue. It's at that point, because it's critically important. And we could talk about it for another hour, but we're going to wind down, and I want to make sure you tell people. So if your company is struggling with figuring out how to get ready for sale, how to, work with the venture capital firm or the PE firm or whoever owns them, or all the things that can happen, if you just need some clarity on where all the Venns intersect, Dan can help you. So Dan, how do people find you, get in touch with you? What's the best, most efficient way?
The company is Intersect Advisory Group. It's intersectadvisory.com. I am Dan at intersectadvisory.com. Would love to chat with you.
Good. So Dan, gosh, next time we'll have to, maybe we could start a book club, start with Marcus Aurelius's Meditations, how it applies to leaders.
Okay.
Or I don't know. I challenge you to find the next topic.
All right. Okay. Challenge accepted.
Thanks so much for joining me, Dan Berg of Intersect Advisory. And for everyone joining now live or on the replay. Thanks again. If you have questions about leadership or communication or any of the topics I typically cover that you'd like me to address in an Ask Nancy, please send them to me at nancy@nancyrberger.com, and we'll see you next month. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Nancy.